Hi, this is Daniel Katz of DanTown. Time has been a major theme in our lives, whether it be a mere form of linear measurement in our perceived dimensional world, or a subject to be manipulated in, say, film, art, Christian Markley's installation, The Clock, or maybe what we perceive as manipulated by time. As we ponder this, I'm pleased to have with me today a world-revered independent horologist whose name has graced the pages of New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, not to mention WatchProSite.com, WatchLounge.com, World Tempest, and WatchUSeek.com. And the list is continuous. I have with us today Peter Speake Marin. Hi, Peter.
Hello there.
So any comment there? Are we being manipulated by time, or it's just...
Are we being manipulated by time? We're controlled by it. I believe that's true.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people don't actually appreciate the true value of it. And the only time that we are really aware of its true value is when we find ourselves without sufficient quantities of it for our own lives, or as I experienced recently when a friend of mine who was considerably younger than myself actually left us. And then suddenly the reality of how short our lives are and how precious time is really comes pretty much crushing home. And that's not meaning to be a negative thing, but that is just the reality of life. It's time. Somebody, I'm not sure I came up with this or somebody else said it to me, but life is the most precious thing we have, and time is life at the end of the day. One equates to the other.
It's so important, yet, people, I guess, in a spiritual sense, that think that, well, there's some truth to it, I guess, beyond our way of linear thought, where time is really important, maybe in a beyond time and space, of course. It may not exist, but it's so important in this world. And I think of Tracy Chapman's song, Change, or Times Are A-Changing by Bob Dylan, and I think it reflects on what you were talking about. So it is so important. I just want to say, before we get into this, how was that last show? It was in a beautiful location, I hear, in Geneva.
It was in a wonderful building, which is right on Lake Geneva, on an estuary which is actually running out of Geneva, and it was originally a former power station. It's an incredible building, beautiful, protected, and today it's mostly used as a venue for special events. And it's wonderful. It's very much, because it has a mechanical essence to it.
Yeah.
It complements the whole mechanical nature of what we make, of what we sell. So no, the venue was wonderful, and the event itself was great. It's existed now, or it's been running now for approximately 4 years.
Right.
I've participated in it just once before.
Yeah.
I think now, whether it's because of the economy or because it's beginning to mature, it's actually really taking off, and it was a big success. I think it was certainly a success for us.
Yes.
And I think it was a success for everybody else who participated as well.
Well, lovely, and hopefully everyone absorbed the anticipated interest in your watches over there, and everything worked out.
I think. I mean, we were busy non-stop. Sometimes, I mean, there was myself and I, two colleagues, and we didn't have time to actually look around and visit and be sociable. I don't know if it was the same for everybody, but I know that on our exhibition center, it was quite extraordinary. I've never seen it like that. I've never experienced it like that before in Geneva and in any other exhibitions that we've actually made.
Even more so than Basel, you think?
Basel's a different kind of animal. Basel lasts for us about 10 days.
Yeah.
And towards the end of Basel, from the sort of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, those days tend to, they kind of quieten down.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Most of the business is done in the early part. But here, because it was shorter, and it runs in parallel with another very big exhibition held in Geneva. It was solid. I must admit, it was. I actually enjoyed it, and I don't normally enjoy these events either.
Yeah, and that's something. Well, that was social. You say you didn't have time to be sociable, but it was probably very sociable with the people you were meeting, and you were just busy. That's all in your own booth.
Well,
Let's
we
get.
had.
Go ahead.
Sorry, we had, I mean, apart from people who are interested in the watches, we had multiple interviews with different magazines and journals, and that was extraordinary. I mean, I'm a watchmaker,
Yes.
and my people are asking I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, by various different magazines and newspapers about my opinions on the trends in the industry, the development of watchmaking in China, and I myself, like anybody, has an opinion. But
Yeah. But
I
once you
find
become famous, man, that's what happens,
I
whether
don't.
you like it or not. So you just
It's
got to
it.
accept it and do what you can.
I actually enjoy it, and I actually find it quite amusing.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
uh, and I've been doing this for so long, I do have quite an opinion on most things.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so let's get into it. And if I have time, I would like to talk, if I hopefully have time, about China, because sometimes, as well as not as bad as Europe, but the world economy is tenuous at times, and we might get into it and see where we stand with China, because some people say it's still going to continue. It's going to have some bumps, but hopefully I'll have time to ask about it. Right now, I want to ask you about the. We've gone over this again and again, and you've talked to probably every magazine about it. But maybe we just skirt over your history just a little bit, because I think for some people it's the first time they've heard about you here. More about where the turning points were. So if you can just quickly go through that. I know you've done it a million times. So
Okay, very quickly, the abridged version.
okay,
I was born in Epping, Essex, just 16 miles outside of London. I studied at Hackney Technical College, which is now at Bethnal Green in London. I was there from 1985 to 1987. Then I went to a watchmaking school in Switzerland, where I specialized in watches. Prior, in London, it was a general education in horology. Leaving Switzerland for the first time, I then had numerous jobs in the UK, in the south of England, Southampton, Oxford, New Bond Street, and then I was involved. All those jobs lasted between about a month and 6 months. Following that period of jumping around, I then fell into restoration, and I spent 7 years restoring watches for an antique dealer in Piccadilly. And I worked and restored watches for companies like Christie's, Sotheby's, Antiquorums, Bonhams, Phillips, and had watches sent to me from all over the world. That was the most influential period of my life, and I loved it. That's where I really fell in love with watchmaking.
okay, stop right there. What I would just curious. The Slow Mos, I think was the name of the antique place you were doing the repairing. I get the feeling that you learn more from there. All due respect to Wostop in the Switzerland school or at your school in England, you learn more than maybe anywhere else, for in a sense. Or can you
Right.
fairly say that?
No, absolutely. I mean, what watchmaking is like learning to drive a car. I mean, you take you learn, you take your test, you get your
Yeah,
driving license, your permit, but really you start to really learn when you're out in the world, when you're actually out driving. And watchmaking is like that.
yeah,
You have the knowledge, you develop a certain amount of skills, and then you go out into the real world, and that's where you really learn. And in restoration,
yeah.
it's this extraordinary education, because there are no instruction manuals. Sometimes these watches were made several hundred years ago, and you have to become a watch investigator,
Yeah,
trying to work out what it should have been like to restore the watches sympathetically to their original state.
right. Now, if you opened up a watch, say it's so. I'm just stuck on Somos just for a second
So,
here. I'm sorry. I'm not. I want to do respect to the gentleman. Sorry. Uh, what did you have that ooh and ah reaction sometimes when you opened up a watch to repair and said, "Wow, what a great idea," or didn't quite react that way?
now, absolutely that way.
Yeah.
And I was so taken by what I was doing that I started at one point to write articles and take pictures of what I was doing, because I wanted to share what I was doing with a larger group of people, because I was very privy to seeing things that nobody else did. For example, I was once given a Patek Philippe Quantum Perpetual pocket watch. This thing was made in about 1884.
Right.
It was made for the Russian market. It all had Russian words, insignia over the piece.
Isn't that something? Okay. Yeah.
It was extraordinary. And when I actually took the dial off of it, it was almost like opening a tomb which had not been opened for since. And
I can imagine that. Yeah.
I saw underneath bearing in this mind, this watch was made over 100 years ago. It was made before the first motorbike was even conceived.
Yeah.
Ever ran. Before the Wright brothers had even flown for the first time.
Yeah.
And what I was seeing was stuff which was actually made with minimum amount of technology, which was highly complex, beautifully made, beautifully finished, beautifully assembled, worked then, works today, and will work forever.
Yeah.
And the artistry in the design, when it was made by guys and designed by guys with pencils and paper and early equipment, it was
not the computers at all, really.
It was extraordinary. It was another world.
Do you feel when I picked up a book by John Stuart Mill on utilitarianism, which sounds like nothing to do with what we're talking about, and it was Old English. I didn't understand it for a number of times. It was for university years ago. And then finally one summer I picked it up, and I felt like I was having a conversation, like having a beer with the guy. Do you feel sometimes like, even though they're not here, that you have a connection with these guys? Like, maybe I'm over-exaggerating. When you open up the piece and you see what's done, and then you're doing some corrections to it, that you're one with some of these guys from the past. They're ghosts, so to speak.
There's a big difference between a lot of those watches and modern watches, and that's when you are actually restoring them. Especially when you have to restore something where there are certain components missing, or you have to restore pieces which are still there, that you actually kind of get inside of the head of the person who designed it in the first place.
Right.
Sometimes there is very much like a wow factor, because you begin to understand how that person thinks.
Right.
Their own psychology, because it very much was the creation, the idea, the concept, the development of individuals. So what you're saying, yeah, there was. And that's also what drew me to that kind of watchmaking, because it had soul. It was human. Yeah. It wasn't mass-produced. It was not contrived. It was something which was genuine. And it was also the very first time. These things had been made for the very first time at that in that epoch. A lot of what is done today is the reinvention of what had been done in the first half of the last century and was born the century beforehand. So it was the beginning. It was really original. It was genuine innovation, and I fell for it.
The only problem is, I think, even back in those days, even though the value of the dollar or the pound or whatever the currency was much lower, it was only people that were of means that can buy these beautiful pieces, I guess. That's the only sad part of this whole thing, I guess. But just the way that is. It's not blaming you at all. But.
It depends. I mean, even if you look at what was perceived to be the lower quality, for example, wristwatches and pocket watches from the century, they were still a very high quality compared to a lot of pieces that are made today. And the general standard was, I think, higher across, or not for everybody, but for certain brands, was higher across the range, and it was actually affordable to not everybody, clearly, but to a reasonably large group of people. And there were, hundreds of thousands of pieces made every year.
Isn't that something? Okay, now I just want to go over to the that part of your history just for a second, the Foundation pocket watch. I'm not sure if it was that watch, but it was a part of a major turning point in your decision-making, where you want to go in your career, perhaps, or what you want to do with watchmaking. Maybe you decide that's when you want to keep with the classicism. I'm not even saying that word right, but the classicism of watchmaking with married to some of the new techniques of today to help carry it through to this millennium. But were you taking something from a Malin movement? I hear from the 20s, some very beautiful stuff. Let's say maybe, I'm not sure, a gear train or whatever it was, and then incorporate it into that watch, or it's a
Absolutely.
kind of a two-question thing. I'm sorry, but that's
Okay, no problem, no
yeah.
problem. The what became known as the Foundation watch, was a watch which I made for myself when I was working in a small town called Lochra when I first moved to Switzerland in 1996. And as with a lot of other watchmakers who were doing the kind of work that I was doing, we all have a certain. I think you have to love what you do when you do what I do.
Right.
And a lot of watchmakers have this dream to make their own watch. Now, the reality of that is that even if you have the knowledge and the skill, it's a huge investment of time and soul in actually making it. And I had started to buy certain machinery when I was living in a Lochla. I converted a bedroom into a workshop, and I decided to do
So
it.
I read, yes.
So I made that watch. It became known as the Foundation watch because it launched everything that I've done afterwards, and it created my philosophy and the DNA of my watches. And the way I made it was I had bought from an old teacher a dozen early movements by a company called Maylan. And these movements had all been handmade but never used. They were just straight out of the factory.
Wow.
They were manufacturing for whatever reason.
And they were the same level as Patek Philippe, as you say, from what I hear.
Same level of Patek. I mean, it was same level of Patek Philippe at that time.
Yeah.
Because the development of companies, the actual quality of their products varies,
Right.
and so the quality of the product varies within the company even
Of
today,
course.
depending on what the kind of product is.
Right.
But I took the wheels, I modified the pinions, I modified the pivots. I took two of these watches and I developed a pocket watch which had parallel running gear trains inside to be able to have, without getting too heavy, a parallel transmission of power driving the tourbillon cage to give a much more fluid transmission of power. Do you need to have it? No. You don't. Without it, probably not. But it was something which I wanted to do, and watchmaking, from my perception, is a thing of art. And
Right,
this was
obviously.
it was a rites of passage for myself.
Did you get to keep it? Or is it some friend of yours has it? Or what? How has it happened to it?
It's actually, presently, I took it apart. I have it. It's kept in my workshop.
Okay.
I took it apart recently to take some pictures of it.
Okay.
Now, after 12 years, and I actually have to now clean it and reassemble it. And there's a few things I never did the first time round, which I now want to finish as well.
Well, that's very costly. You may have to charge yourself so many dollars to fix that. But anyways, no, it sounds great. Now, from that, I guess there's a certain philosophy that, and you sort of hinted at your philosophy in watchmaking. I don't have to reemphasize, I suppose, that it's trying to keep good quality and integrity in a watch. And you like the classic feel as opposed to trying to be wild and audacious like MB&F or Urwerk or some of these, not any disrespect to what they're doing. But have we covered your philosophy? Because I think we have in a way. Or is there something added to it?
Well, one of the things is that in my world, and with people like Felix Baumgartner, the Kronefeld brothers, the McGonigal brothers, all of these guys are watchmakers. And what they make is a representation of who they are. And in the same way that what an artist paints is who they are. So what I do is in a way an extension of my take on horology, and it's who I am. And the initial philosophy, that I aim to make classical watches, it's just that I'm a classical watchmaker. That's my history, and that's my soul, if you like. And most of my influences came from that period in Piccadilly, as you mentioned earlier, and they were assimilated into the Foundation watch. Everything that I learned, and the result is a contemporary collection of watches with an original new design that has strong classical elements, which is actually timeless.
Right.
Yet,
oh, that's something nice to hear. Yes.
Yeah, it is so different from everything else that's out there that even though it's effectively a round-cased watch, it is highly identifiable as Speake Marin and can't be confused with anything else.
Yes.
That's
where your heart is, and that's why it would go away from that.
That is, people often ask me, say, what is different about your watches? And it took me a long time to really work out what made it different. And what makes it different is every individual is unique. And what every individual makes is also unique if it comes from, I'd say, a genuine, a real place. And what I've done comes from me. And it was there. I made it originally. The original wristwatches, which were born of the foundation watch, were made because I wanted to make a wristwatch that I wanted that didn't exist. Right. And I had good fortune to find out that a lot of other people liked the same thing.
Right. Well, there you go. My life drawing teacher, Carrie Kim, would tell us that all of us are so different in our drawing of the same model, and just hold true to that. Don't try to compare yourself to da 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 da. This is from what you're seeing, and so on. Anyways, that sounds so true what you say. I'm going to go to a quick quote here, and then we're going to just take a quick look at your watches and maybe a little bit of comment. We'll see the site, and we'll just quickly take a look at that. At a journey through time exhibition, and I'm not holding you to this quote, by the way. You said in so many words in Business Today a couple of years ago, and I'm not holding you to that there was much novelty disguised as innovation in the design of other watches. A real and genuine originality was lacking. My own work is pure and has integrity. Now, it's basically, I guess my guess would be watches. Some of the watches, they may have a certain design, but they're giving it a little bit. They may just add some silicone to an area where they don't need it because it's overused, or they may be putting little extra things that just has nothing to do with adding to the watch. Or what did you mean by that? Or do you remember that quote?
I do. I think I had my salesman hat on when I said that, but I would stand by it as well. Every company has to have a unique selling point that differentiates themselves from other people. And in a market such as watchmaking, which is ferocious, and between a lot of the big companies, it's really a war out there. They use any tools, and as in other industries, it's not a criticism, it is an observation. People use whatever they can to promote what they do. And on occasions, tools which are used to make an end product are used in a means in marketing to be able to promote that product. It may be a material, it may be a covering, but sometimes these things are not quite as wonderful as they are. They're a means to an end.
Right.
And it's almost that what people dress up as innovation is really not. It's not classical. It's not something which is going to last a long time. It's not even something which is particularly original, but it's something which people concentrate on to try to promote a product, to try to differentiate it from something else.
It's like overemphasizing a tool. I remember Neil Postman once said, we're changing sometimes from a tool using society to a society being used by tools. So maybe the marketing groups are overemphasizing, you might say, a certain tool, which is just the tool for, or a certain aspect of the watch.
It's it's a marketeer's world.
Yeah.
But when I started off what I did, I was very, very naive, and far less naive today. And there are a lot of companies out there that, in essence, spend more money on the marketing and the dressing than they do the contents. It's like, I call them perfume companies. And for a long time, I was very critical of that. And in a sense, I still am. But the reality is, you can make the most beautiful product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, nobody will buy it.
That's right. There's an equilibrium there that, you need marketing, but you can't stand them.
Absolutely. And I know that there are some companies that they promote ideas and concepts as if it's something incredible. But if you measure different innovative ideas and think, are they going to be still interesting in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years' time, then I think you begin to put into perspective the true value of what a lot of different companies boast as being extraordinary.
Yeah.
I think what is extraordinary is something which you design today and is going to be there well into the future.
Right.
Not something which is suddenly going to be a fad and fall onto the grey market within a period of a year or 2 years.
Okay. I was looking at the 8-day Portofino by IWC, and it looks okay, but I don't know if it's just a marketing. Pardon me?
It's a beautiful watch.
Okay, there you go. Okay, And Hugh, can we get to this to your site in just a little while there? I'm just going to ask him. Okay, um, when you were accepted into membership of the Academy of Horolog, and forgive me for my mispronunciation, Academy Horolog Creative Independent. That must have been just tickled you pink. Not that you were aiming for that. It's not like you were looking for it. But do you remember when there was a phone call, maybe, or how was it? How was it done?
It was all kind of accidental. There's a wonderful man and watchmaker. He's almost sort of the godfather of watchmakers, a gentleman called Philip Dufour.
Yeah.
And I met Philip Dufour just after I had, at Basel Watch Fair, just after I had finished making the watch, the foundation pocket watch.
Yeah.
I had pictures of it. I think it was on the Thursday, the very end of a very grueling exhibition. I showed it to Philip, and he took my hand in his hand and just looked at me, having looked at the watch, and said, "Next year you have to be here."
How do you like that? Okay.
And coming from somebody like Philip, that was a wow moment.
Yeah, and I've seen his stuff. I think on Watch Lounge. It's quite something. I think I would have been tickled pink. Also, when Major de Thomas had asked you twice now to team up with someone, and now it was Daniel Roth. I think this is just recently, or is that a while ago?
The first time was with
Christophe Claret
and Claret.
Yeah.
And the second time was with Daniel Roth. And what was that like? Well, when I was going through my education, these guys' names became household legends.
Right, right.
Suddenly, as a relatively young person, although I'm feeling considerably older today, to actually work with these household names,
right,
it was extraordinary, and there was no ego behind them. They were the real deal, decent, qualified, talented guys, and it was genuine. They weren't just names used to hype a brand. These were real people who were very, very creative, and I had an experience which I think very, very few people. Very few people in watchmaking, very few watchmakers could actually share, which is actually to work with legends.
Yeah. But when you meet them, I'm sure you had to say to yourself, "Look, calm down," because they want you to talk to them like regular people, not like some icon. And then it works out.
It was actually very different because at that time I was a little bit cynical of. I was cynical of the industry, and I was cynical of what these people might be like.
Oh, I see. Right.
Cynical in the sense that I kind of thought maybe it was just hype, and I swallowed a certain amount of pride when I started working with them because I discovered very, very quickly that it wasn't hype. And then I actually grew very fond of the people with whom I had the privilege of working.
Well, kudos to you that you're in something that you love, and you're sharing it with like-minded people that are quite brilliant, and they. Obviously, I think, and you may not be totally aware of it, not that I know you well, Peter, at all, but that they revere you also, even though you're somewhat newer in the business, but even though you've been, like, I don't know, 25, 30 years in it. Hugh, are we ready for... so we're going to just go to just a quick look at the site, and I'll start mentioning to you because you can't see what I see, and I'll just ask you maybe to make a quick comment on these beautiful pieces that... people are going to see from our end. So you're going to go, oh, there we go. So I'm looking at I think the Spirit, and that is a more recent watch, somewhat of an affordable one. And the movement was a little bit changed inside from some of your earlier entry-level watches?
It's a different approach, and there's a different reason why that watch exists. If the watch you're looking at, it has a black dial, large Roman numerals. Okay, the Spirit is actually, that's the watch.
Oh, lovely, man, lovely. Not too small.
Everything else I've done up until now, all of the calibers are hand finished to different degrees, but they're all hand finished.
Okay.
And when I designed the Spirit, in fact the Spirit Mark 1, this is now the Spirit Mark 2, there was a reason, and the original one was also hand finished. The story behind it is very different from anything else I've actually done. During the years 2009, 2010, this industry suffered one of the worst recessions in its history. And a lot of the people that I knew within it people sometimes who are third or fourth generation of families and businesses, they lost their businesses. They went bankrupt or they got bought out by some of the big groups. And regardless of what happened to these people, they continued to get up, to adapt, to move on. And a lot of these people were my friends. And that element of the human spirit was something which I kind of revered. And it was something that, even within my own life experience, personified what a human is. The spirit, the watch, is very much linked with that. And on the back of the watch, there's a slogan which is fight, love, and persevere. Fight because on occasions we have to get up. In fact, quite often in life we have to fight to keep on going. Persevere because you have to never give up. And love because everybody needs passion in life, otherwise life becomes quite empty and flat. So the spirit became more of a message than simply a piece of haute horlogerie.
You know, with Bob Fosse, it was a famous dance choreographer for the Broadway shows, and he said there's a movie tribute to him where a famous actor gets up playing him, and he just looks up in the mirror, and he's just raggedy from the late night work the night before, and he looks in the mirror every time he gets up in the morning, and he says it's showtime, and then splashes his face with water. So maybe the back of your watch is like that for everyone who looks at the watch when they have to put it on.
Well, the very first one was a limited edition, and it was sold out pretty much straight away. And occasionally we have people who want them, and we search around and we buy them back from different people to be able to deliver them. But the message behind it resonated with a much wider group of people. I think it resonates to pretty much everybody at some point in their life. So I wanted to make something which would be affordable for a much wider group of people. And the way to do that would be to actually avoid certain elements which make the watch that much more expensive, and that's basically all the hand finishing. So I made the second version, a little bit different from the first one. Slimmer case, larger case, diameter. The caliber is machine finished opposed to being hand finished. The case back is closed. You have the slogan much more bolder engraved on the back.
So the inside is not as polished, you say, or what?
It's not hand finished. It looks beautiful, but you
still
don't see
beautiful.
it.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's finished like you would find in most high quality conventional Swiss watches.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Right, whether it's Patek of Vacheron or Rolex, it's the same kind of finishing, but that's machine finishing. And what I'm known for is for hand finishing. So the machine finished version, because it's machine finished, it meant that we were able to execute a watch at a lower price point to be able to, and also something which we could execute in much larger numbers. And that is the entry-level watch that I have. But for me, it's one of the most important watches I've ever made because of the message which is associated to the watch.
Oh, wonderful. Peter, so Hugh, can we go to resilience? And I don't know if we're going to get to go to all of them. And then we'll go to Renaissance. No, let's see if... can you go to resilience? We'll just take a quick look at that. There we go. We have the resilience, which is have some of the elements that you just mentioned.
The resilience is called resilience for two reasons. One is that it's pretty much the first watch I ever designed, and it is the most classical, the most sober, the most simple in its designs, but also the dial is made of enamel. So it's resilient into time in relation to its classicism and also in relation to its longevity. The enamel is the same type of enamel, it's hard enamel, which is fired about 6 or 7 times, and providing that somebody doesn't take a hammer to it, the watch will remain with the same aesthetic basically forever, in the same way as you had an early pocket watch as a clock. So the resilience it's resilient to time in both aspects.
Beautiful with enamel, and I remember I have some old clocks at home, but I guess one has to be careful you don't drop that watch because the enamel could crack easily or something.
For everyday use, it's fine. But the enamel, it's a small surface area. It's 33 mil in diameter. Yeah. It's millimeter thick, and it's sandwiched solidly within the watch. I wouldn't particularly want to play golf or go boxing with the watch, but with all the pieces we've made, I think I've had 2 back in about 10 years because somebody has actually dropped the watch onto...
Oh, wow. Okay, that's good. That's good. Can we go to the Renaissance, Hugh? I don't want to overdo with all the watches you made, but I'm just gonna jump over to the Renaissance quickly, and if we have time, we can take a look at that beautiful commission watch, the Anima, if I'm saying it right, the diamond one. So,
Yeah.
okay. Here, obviously, this is not for the for everybody, but it's just beautiful to look at, and I wish this would be at a show somewhere, like just for regular people. And I was talking to the Raw Museum in Toronto about having a show someday. I mentioned it to Martin Pulley, a colleague of yours, about that idea. But anything you might like to add to it? I mean, it's a beautiful skeleton. You got the turbulent movement in there. It's pretty self-explanatory, but anything extra you want to share?
The Renaissance is, I mean, it's a high-end complication watch, but it's there's a story associated to it. The reason it's called the Renaissance is that in 2011, which is pretty much the best year for me from a business point of view, I redesigned and I repackaged, not a good word, I reapproached my whole view to the future of my work. And the Renaissance marked the beginning of a new period. And I wanted to have a watch which would be representative of many of the aspects of my work that I've done over the last 12 years. So the tourbillon was important because it associated to the original pocket watch. The repeater because of the developments that I've made in repeaters and also the number that I've restored. The case is a Piccadilly case. That is one of the signature points. The bridges
It's become a famous case, the Piccadilly case, yes.
The Piccadilly is, I think, is an iconic case. I think it's something which is going to, like most of my watches, which will well outlive me and assure the continuity of Speake Marin into the future. And the last, one of the other elements of the watch is that when you turn it over, on the back of each watch there is a unique engraving, and that makes each of the pieces, and there are 6 in the series, each one unique. And they are phenomenal. They mark a new period in my development as a watchmaker, and as a
that's just stunning, stunning. Yeah,
they're the kind of things which I believe they're future antiques. They're pieces which are always going to have a high value, and in the future will increase. And they can't go any other way than actually become far more desirable as time goes by.
How long did it take for you and your team to make that one, just out of curiosity? Just ballpark. How long did it take it? That's
the whole project was 2 years, but it was really, once the designs were finished, it was about 1 year of production to get to the end of the first piece. So about a year of development and then a year to actually launch and have the very first made watch. They're super complicated, not only because of the caliber, but because of the cases, because they have to be water resistant, and they have sliders on the side, and you have to have, in essence, a case inside of a case to ensure that it remains water resistant.
And was there a certain group that helped start the case, the shaping of the case for you? Or you did it from scratch? I don't think, or how does it work with the case?
The aesthetic of the case I designed.
Right, of course.
When it comes to the all the intricacies of the mechanism of inside.
That's what I meant.
There's 2 or 3 specialized companies in Switzerland, and I worked with one that was based in Neuchâtel, where I went to school, and they specialize in making those kind of watches. So they used a standard invention to be able to ensure that these watches remain water resistant, and they effectively wrapped my DNA around that mechanism.
Lovely, and they probably work for help other top people like yourself. I don't know, Hugh, do we have time to just a quick look at the Anima and the other one? Okay. Are you okay, Peter? Because
I'm
okay. Because anyone who's watching this can always turn it off if they find it's too much, and they can come back to it later. Okay, so which one are we on? Okay, so we're going to take a quick look. And how did you, did someone call you up and just ask you I want a watch with diamonds? This was a commission work, was it not?
No.
Oh, was it?
Yet.
Oh, okay.
Long story. I helped a young lady make a watch to finish off her design project in the town of Lausanne. I didn't influence the design, that was hers.
Okay.
But she didn't know how to execute it, and for her studies, I helped her put it together with the right people. She did all the work, and she ended up coming top of her class. And that was to her credit. That's nothing to do with me. I just gave her the tools to be able to make the watch.
Uh-huh.
I finished it. She wanted to do something with me, so I suggested that we make a ladies' watch. But the mandate was to make something which was organic. And she ended up coming up with this concept to make a diamond dial which looked almost like the development of ice on a glass pane. So that was the concept. And there are over 300 diamonds, even though they don't look like it, actually in the dial between 0.81 millimeter and I think 1.1 millimeter in diameter. And it was quite a project, and it went on for quite a long time. The watch was not commissioned, but I ended up selling it to a lady in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And the young lady designer who helped me with it, I think somewhere on my business Facebook page, if you trawl down, you'll find her and you'll find out the whole story.
Well, but Malaysia has a history for you. Apparently, your parents were married there, and was it Malaysia or was it
in Kuala Lumpur? I'm just going to move my computer around before the battery dies on me. My mum and dad were married in Malaysia now, goodness me, over 60 years ago.
Yeah.
They, to give you an idea of how different the world was, it took my mother, who went separately to my father, about 3 weeks to actually get there by planes, trains, and automobiles.
Like a movie, okay.
It was quite a story. And I, as a kid, trawled through their photograph albums, and my dad was a fitter for the Whirlwind helicopters for the RAF. So I saw these pictures of them flying over the jungle in Whirlwind helicopters and living in literally huts. And then later on in my life, I spent about 4 years living in a hostel whilst I was a student in London with a group of Malaysian guys who made one of the happiest parts of my life.
How do you like that?
They were incredible guys. And today, I got to say, I don't know if it's because of that or in another life I was Malay or lived there.
Yeah.
But I have the feeling on occasions that Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, is like a spiritual home for me.
Well, there you go. And that's why where some of the design of the watches may have a reflection on that. And it's due justice, I suppose, that a woman from Malaysia bought that beautiful piece.
It was nice.
To something. This is your home away from home. And I guess you know the language a little bit, too.
Cool. Everybody there speaks English anyway.
Yeah, okay, but still.
But they're incredible people. Extremely happy, cheerful, happy, cheerful, positive. And we have, as a tiny little brand watchmaker, we have quite a following of people there as well.
Okay, we're near the end of this, and I'd love it. It sounds like we could talk on forever. But as Hugh starts to bring up the triple round, there's one other one that he worked with Daniel Roth. That last one, the Triple Crown round. Do you have? That's with the Maître de Temps. That one. I'm going to ask you. I know what your opinion is, mass production. I think, but I just want to go back to it again, and yeah, there we go. There we do have the Triple Crown round right now, so maybe we'll comment on that. Is this the first time you worked with Daniel Roth?
Yeah. Ironically, when I was a young student and I was looking for a job in Daniel's heyday, I actually went to him to ask for a job, but he didn't speak English and my French was non-existent.
Right.
So that was pretty much the closest I came to the guy. So 20-odd years later, or 15 years later, when that project came about, it was kind of unusual. But I mean, I'd heard about him clearly, but I had never worked with him. I hadn't really ever met him before either.
Yeah. Did he ever say why his name is really not on Bulgari? Because he designed some of the Bulgari beautiful pieces.
That story in relation to the man, the name, the company, the evolution is kind of complicated. And it goes on for a long...
Well, next interview.
Listen, it's something which I don't even know the details about. I can only I can only guess. So
Yeah,
rather than
it's business, and we don't want to get it wrong. So let's just leave it at, I really shouldn't have asked that in the first place, and that might be his own personal thing. So we'll leave it. Back to mass production just for a second. Um, um, you said once that you would like to make timepieces the best way they can be made in technical sense, as opposed to making them fit into the largest number of watches. And we sort of covered it with your earlier explanation. But I'm asking you, can there not be some acceptable meeting point of acceptance of both objectives? So let's say someday, not that you want to be involved with it now, but if you, let's say, teamed up or you met a young or not so young manufacturer that had a good heart of where he wanted to take pieces, you think there might be a way of working with a company where they're making some semblance of being honest and true and having integrity of a watch without while still being on an assembly line? Or is it impossible?
It's all possible. It's all doable. My main observation in relation to that comment was when, for example, you take a lot of companies for very pragmatic commercial reasons will make a very small mechanical caliber because it will fit inside of everything from a lady's watch all the way through to a gent's watch. But when you have a massive 50 millimeter diameter watch, inside of it you have a 20 millimeter or 24 millimeter caliber, there's something just kind of not right about it.
Okay.
Intrinsic way.
And this happens all the time.
It happens a lot. It
Yeah,
happens a
yeah,
lot. The better the company, the less it actually does happen.
yeah.
But quality it's a subjective point of view, because if you look at something like Rolex, where they make nearly 1 million pieces a year, they do actually an extraordinary job of what they do. It is incredibly consistent. There's no hand manipulation, but what they do is incredible. So it's very much a point of view. Other people may say that something which is entirely hand finished is, it defines or personifies what quality is all about. But really, it's something different from each person, each brand, and the perception. For me, what I do, as I said earlier, is a representation of who I am. And the way I do things is my way. That's how I do it. That's what defines my watches. Somebody may say that Rolex is better because they have they produce pieces in incredible consistency at incredible quantities. It's just a different way of looking at it.
Right, I see.
I don't think. I think it's that's a conversation you and I could probably have
over a beer
and never come to a conclusion.
That's right, and it's an open-ended question, really.
We would be drinking a lot of beer.
Yeah, and this will be not really fair to ask because you probably have many influences. But is there a name that really pops up that is a major mentor to you today, outside of the people that passed away, like Louis Burgat and so on? Is there someone today that you look up to, or is probably too many people to mention?
Listen, there's not really an individual because it was a period in my life where I worked with everything. But one of the companies that I adored that actually made watches for other people was a company called Nickel Nielsen. And these guys made pocket watches for people like Frodgen and Dent, very famous early English watchmakers. And what they did was just extraordinary. It was beautiful, and you can always tell their calibers by the very angular but elegant execution of levers and components within the watches. And their kind of philosophy, their simplicity and their pragmatism has always kind of stayed with me. My style is very Gothic in a lot of ways, but there's a pragmatism that comes from their design ethic, which is in the ultimate execution of most of what I do. So even though the styling is different, there's a very parallel sense to the way things are actually made and what they have to do.
Interesting. Lovely. And China, going to the economy. Now, you're not the economist. You're not one of the talking heads on CNN, I know. But here's another one that we can talk on forever about. But there is some concern amongst the the doomsdayers that the economy could collapse because of whatever they can't keep up with the internal demand for product in on the domestic end. So they may not be able to do the Chinese economy may not be able to do and supply like they have for the rest of the world and save the European economy to some extent and buy watches perhaps. I don't know. Others say it's just going to be a little glitch in the road, but the Chinese economy is extremely resilient and they will just come and continue to be strong. Any comments from your end?
Everything is changing, that's clear. In general, for a little while now, there is no real stability. A lot of companies that go in thinking of China as being the solution, the answer, and then the moment that there is any kind of glitch, everybody panics. I'm kind of the opinion that most economies are like living organisms. They're people, if you like, and they're affected by everything else that goes on around them and what they're told. They're influenced heavily by media and often by hearsay.
This is the emotion quotient that we cannot analyze, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And honestly, there's nobody can really know what's going to happen tomorrow. The only thing that's presently certain is that it's an incredibly important market. It's going to be, I don't think it's ever going to reduce. How it's going to affect Europe, I honestly don't know. But in my industry, and this is my industry opposed to looking at things on a larger level, but maybe there is a parallel, there is a tendency that as soon as a new market emerges, everybody runs into it. And they're a little bit, I used the expression recently, like people become the like termites. They go into a section, they eat everything, and then when it's gone, they move somewhere else.
So true.
And the watch industry, with the volumes that are produced and being $1 billion business, that is what tends to happen. And it's not something which is conceived long term. It's not something which is thought out, which is with a strategy which is going to assure a long-lasting approach to develop any form of stability. And as a result, things go up and down. That's the world that we live in today. And I honestly don't know how long it will be until things calm down. What I do believe and what I do know is that small companies and people like myself, and also people who make larger volumes of watches, companies maybe like Lang & Söhne, they have a much more long-term view. They're not termite people. And they have a more, I would say, pragmatic, solid, structured viewpoint for the future, which may mean they're not going to maybe do as well in the immediate, but means that they're actually going to be around for a long time to come. So regardless of what happens with a lot of the bigger players, there will be a sense of stability brought by a smaller group of individuals. And there will always be opportunities as well. But from a more political or more economical point of view, I got to say, I don't think anybody knows.
Absolutely good answer. Sure. Sure.
I don't. All I do know, as I said at the beginning, is that there is no stability today. And I think it's going to be a little while, quite a little while, before anybody really sees that.
Well, according to Fareed Zakaria, another 5 years. But again, he's guessing. Peter, thank you so much. That was a very good answer. I enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully others that I'll put this out to will also enjoy it. And someday, I, along many others, will look forward to owning the Spirit. We do have it, but owning some representation of it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, bye-bye, Peter. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay,
Take care.
Bye. Okay, this is Daniel Katz. Thank you very much for paying attention to the world through a great artist, an artisan. And although watches may seem obsolete, they certainly are not. We can tell a time through your internet, through your iPhone, and through various other means. but there's a certain representation of something that is timeless that just feels good by being on your wrist. This is Daniel Katz for DanTown. Goodbye.